All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is the December 9th meeting of the Training Subcommittee of the Racial Equity and Policing Commission. And my name is Dante James. I am one of the facilitators for the commission. And today, did I say it? Today is December 9th. It is 5:06 now as we begin this. Um, we are here with Commissioner Davis, Commissioner Suarez, Commissioner Hawkins, Commissioner Tedeschi, and staff from the city, Coletta um, Lynch, and Ms. Sherry Whitworth is a member of the public. Also with us is Larry Schooler, who is also with the Langdon Group as we working with the full city commission. And so wanted to invite Larry because he had some, we talked briefly last time about the um, discussion of the community engagement process that will be being used to hear from as many Salt Lake City residents as possible. And Larry is the expert in that regard. And so wanted to give us a brief kind of 2 or 3 minute overall description of how that process is going to work and how you might be able to support that process. So Larry?
Thank you, Dante. Can everybody hear me okay? Audio is good. Great to be with you all. I'll just take a couple of minutes, and I apologize for, I think Commissioner Hawkins may have heard some of this already in Josh's subcommittee. We are getting ready to launch kind of a two-phased approach to our listening to the public. And it'll start here shortly with a couple of tools that are designed to help provide access to anyone with the desire to provide input. The first is a local Salt Lake number that you see up on the screen, and of course we'll be emailing this information to you. This phone number can receive recorded voicemails from anyone who wants to make comments to the commission, and we've got it set up to press 1 for English and 2 for Spanish, and we can accept messages in Spanish that can be translated into English for the commission who don't speak Spanish fluently. This number is active and ready to receive messages. We're just fine-tuning a couple of things before we announce it, but it is ready to receive public comment. And again, this is in service of folks who may not be able to make it at the time of a particular meeting to make public comment, but nevertheless want to share some sort of testimonial. This is a good way for them to do that. We also have set up a pretty complex text message based engagement tool that will allow for people to provide input via text message, and that is live as well. Again, we're not sort of formally launching it yet, but did want to make you all aware of it. Basically, what you'll do is you'll send a text message to this local Salt Lake number at the top of the screen, and then you'll text the word equity as your actual text message, and then the system just kind of walks you through step by step the questions that we would like for the public to answer. So here again, we're trying to make sure that we can get input from people who may not have reliable internet access, or for whom a meeting like this would be, too much bandwidth required, or just, for whatever reason would rather participate more anonymously via text message. And so this is an option we think will work well for some folks, and it is live, but we'll publicize it a little bit more here very shortly. And then finally, at this phase, I wanted to just give you a glimpse into some of our online engagement tools. We've set up a site that will enable people to get information on the commission, but it'll also allow folks to take either a quick survey or join a what we call moderated discussion. And the idea here is to kind of recreate what they might get in a live real-time meeting in an online setting where they make comments and then others can respond. And when I say moderated, I mean one of our staff, one of our team members will be monitoring the forum to make sure that everyone stays within the guidelines for public comment that were in place for the commission and for the city as a whole. I will tell you, having done many of these over the course of my career, that they are remarkably civil when folks realize that this is something that is being listened to by an official entity like the commission. So I don't expect there to be much difficulty, but we are here to monitor and make sure the conversation stays on task and on point. So again, this will be live momentarily, but we'll be asking you to share this across your networks via email, social media, and the like. And this will be open through at least, I would say, the end of January. In the month of January, we will be scheduling and hosting a number of what we're calling listening sessions, which is essentially small group meetings to discuss commission matters. But we're also going to host a broadcast of a listening session with the mayor and the police chief on Wednesday, the 13th of January at 5 o'clock. That'll be something you'll be able to hear in both English and Spanish. You can participate by phone, you can watch it on television, you can watch it on a live stream. So there'll be a lot of access points there. We're going to make an especially aggressive push to get high attendance for that across the entire community and make sure that everybody can participate. So again, if you want to mark your calendars, that date is Wednesday, January 13th at 5 in the evening. So I think that's all I had to share at the moment, but certainly I'm happy to take any questions you all might have, and I'm obviously reachable easily through Coletta and the staff offline. So happy to take any questions if necessary.
Hey, Larry.
Yes.
I was noticing on the website, the pictures that you had, could there be a little bit more minorities involved?
Oh, great point. Those are,
Um,
yeah, those are actually stock images that we haven't done anything
Right.
to, the ones that you saw. So yes, I think that's a great suggestion, and I'll be happy to pursue that after we get through here.
Okay, and then with the school, I think maybe you should add like a little bit younger, like have a variety of like maybe a
School age
family
children.
that
Yeah,
have school age children.
that's a great idea. Thank you so much for that, and I'll make those changes. And when you get the link from me, you'll notice those changes. So I hope that the pictures we select make sense. Thanks for
Okay,
that.
great, thank you.
Larry, I have two questions. One, is there any way to suggest to people that there are others that need to talk and that no one of them should take all of the time?
Yes, sir. I mean, in the context of the website, the text message line, and the phone line, there's really no limitations. It's not like only one person can be, using it at one time. As many people as would like can post. On the 13th at the public event, most likely I'll be co-facilitating that event, and it's very easy for me to make sure that no one person takes up too much of the time. Historically, I've had as many as 20, 25 or more participants in the single hour. We also have other ways for people to participate so that if we don't get to them, they still get heard. So that's certainly a goal of ours. Yes, sir.
Okay, and the other question is in the public announcement about using virtual systems, we've said that people should be careful about their language and about it being offensive. Are we going to add that in some way?
We are, sir. We've replicated that on the webpage that I showed you as part of our terms and conditions. We'll also indicate that in other settings that we're collecting input. That same messaging.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Schooler?
I had one more question.
Of course.
With the texting, with the individuals texting in, are they going to be reaching out to individual commissioners, or are you going to like say, hey, I believe this might be best for you to answer, or how are you going to approach that?
Well, the way this works is that we will let the public know that they can participate via text at this phone number and with this keyword. That all will land in kind of a shared mailbox. It's not going to go to any one commissioner at that moment. It'll all be collected in a data file, if you will, and then we'll be disseminating all of the information that we collect via text out to you all, most likely in the form of a spreadsheet of some kind or some other easy to read collection of answers. But you all won't necessarily get any text messages directly. I mean, we're not giving out, your contact information. This is a kind of a generalized box, so it won't be sending alerts to you when these folks text in. It'll just come to our sort of central dashboard, and then once we get text messages in, we'll be compiling them for your review as we go.
Okay, and what will be the turnaround time?
That's a good question. We can be flexible there. I don't want to bombard you all with emails or other messaging, but I mean we could certainly do a daily turnaround, meaning that if someone texted on a Tuesday, we could give you the results the next day.
Okay.
My recommendation would be maybe just to do sort of either a weekly or every few days kind of report, just so that it doesn't get to be too too much in your inbox, but I'm certainly happy to turn it around more quickly than that. It'll be available to me, essentially instantly. And so, if folks want to receive it as soon as it comes in, I'm happy to disseminate it. I just don't want to bombard inboxes.
And that will be communicated to the citizens, correct? Like you won't receive a response you'll receive a response within 24 hours or within a week.
Yeah,
Okay.
the main purpose of this is for us to collect input from them. If they have
Right.
questions, we will certainly endeavor to respond to those questions as expeditiously as we can, depending on who needs to answer it. If it's a member of the city staff, a member of the facilitation team, a police department official, et cetera, we'll route those questions, should we get them, to whoever we think is best equipped to answer them as quickly as possible. But our primary purpose in this is to enable them to share input and feedback with you all as you make your deliberations. So that'll be the primary way that we use it and message it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Thank you. Anything else?
Looking forward.
Thank you very much. And certainly continue to keep the suggestions coming, and you all can reach me through the staff. But we appreciate your support with this, and we hope it yields some great feedback across a wide array of perspectives across the city.
Yeah, it
Thank
looks
you all.
great. Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you, Larry. Oh, a couple new commissioners. Commissioner Kaili, welcome. Commissioner Romero, welcome. And I think that's it. So just going down the agenda, hopefully everybody had a chance to take a look at the agenda, which I think got sent out kind of late yesterday evening. Just as we review minutes from the last meeting on December 2nd, any thoughts, additions, corrections to those notes that you received?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll just, yes, ma'am, thank you. All right, so those are good. So also now, next up is any report from the Youth Commission relevant to the training subcommittee. Commissioner Tedeschi.
I wasn't at the Saturday meeting for the youth subcommittee, so I haven't shared our information from this subcommittee, nor have I gotten to get a report from them yet. So hopefully next week I'll come back with twice as much information.
Okay, that's great. Commissioner Romero, are you also a member of the youth subcommittee? I don't know for sure.
I am. I'm in the same situation as Mater. I wasn't able to attend the meeting this past week, but hopefully this week we'll get a good discussion going, come back with a lot of useful information.
Okay, great. Thank you both. Next up is just a discussion of some of the data that was received from Salt Lake City PD. And the most recent piece of information received, hopefully you had a chance to take a look at it, was on the numbers of folks who were released or chose to resign from the academy and the demographics of those. We had asked about the demographics of who was not making it through the academy at any given point in time. And I don't want to just read to you, but just generically, big picture anyway, since September 2018, a total of 21 folks have been released, 7 released on probation, and 12 resigned from the academy. 81% were Caucasian, 10% were Asian, 5% were Native, Hawaiian, Pacific Islander. I don't know which, and then 5% were Latino. Of the probationary releases, 29% were Caucasian and 5% were Asian out of the total number. And those who resigned, 52% were Caucasian, 5% Asian, 5% Native or Pacific Islander, and 5% Latino. And then the final note says there's a slight variance in the percentages as the percentages were rounded up 5 and above and dropped 4 and below. I'm not quite sure what that means, but I think we have the general sense of what the numbers are. So I'm not sure if you had a chance to take a look at this or digest this, but I would just encourage you to do so. And then we could, I think, also then have a deeper conversation just about outcomes of who was making it through the academy. And in terms of demographics, and I'm not quite sure, but I would suggest the numbers I see essentially mirror the percentage of the population of Salt Lake City on some level. If 81% Caucasian, 10% Asian, 5% Native, Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, or 5% Latino. Latino, I think, is under. What's the percentage of Latinos in Salt Lake City? It's greater than 5%, I believe. So anyway, just the numbers for this is the only data that we've received since we've made several requests. So any thoughts or questions on this particular piece of information?
The data does not seem to include anything about African Americans. Does that mean that they were not there, or that they?
Yeah, that's the next question. That's the next question. I think I need to look because we did receive the demographics of the last 2 or 3 classes, and I didn't pull it up, and I don't know if it's in my file here. But I know that we have seen the data on the demographics, and as I recall, well, I don't want to guess. The numbers of African Americans were extremely small to begin with, so maybe this means Black folks made it through. I don't know. I can take a look back at what that data is, Reverend, and see what the totality of the numbers of Black folks in the academy were.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions on this piece of data?
For the people on probationary release, why does it have like a specific reason why, or is it just like they were on probation and they were released?
It does not give us. It does not give us specific reasons why.
So if we get the specifics, that'd be great.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. We have several requests into the chief for additional data. Quite a bit of what was discussed last week, even just the demographics of the FTOs, which we have yet to receive. So we don't know what the demographics look like. So next piece of the conversation is just a continued discussion of the report on 21st century policing and how we were beginning to craft broad recommendations and then working to try to narrow those down a little bit. We had created 2 broad recommendations. One, to include community trainers in the academy to co-train, co-create curriculum, and be a part of that training process was the broad recommendation. We have requested the curriculum that is actually used and the content of that curriculum from the chief for the 2 components. One is fair and unbiased policing, which is a 4-hour session, and one which is a 20-hour session that we don't know the title of, I don't recall, that it's presented by the outside consultant Arbinger. And so we've asked if we could be able to review that content so we can see what that content looks like. So that's a request we haven't yet. I mean, we just made the request, so it hasn't been completed yet. And then the second broad recommendation language was specifically to prioritize CIT training for all Salt Lake City police officers. And that includes laterals, because there's no priority for laterals to become CIT certified. And then after the academy, your CIT certification expires in 2 years. And then so subsequent to that, it's just voluntary whether you want to recertify or not, as the understanding was presented last week. So theoretically, a majority of cops on the street who are fresh out of the academy could not be currently certified. And so that's, what I've tended to hear is the mantra that all of our police officers are CIT certified, which is not true, and are probably, we don't know the number who are currently certified who've been out of the academy more than 2 years. And so we have that request for information and to see if we can get that data on how many folks have decided either to opt out or have not recertified at all, or who has recertified subsequent to 2 years. So those are two big, broad recommendations that we come up with. I do want to invite Ms. Whitmer. She had sent quite a bit of information to the commission, and I don't think it's been sent to each of you yet. Colette, am I wrong? Is that not been sent out yet to each of the commissioners?
No, I've sent it out, and I can, I'm sorry, I'm not on video. I can definitely resend the information if you all need it, but I have sent it to the commissioners.
Okay, one second. Apologies. So in terms of the CIT training, I think it's been made clear that Salt Lake City originally was the state certification component for CIT. And after, I believe it was 2016, Ms. Whitmer said, it chose to do its own thing, essentially, whatever that might be. And so there's a statewide certification for CIT, but Salt Lake City Police Department is currently not participating in that. It's doing its own thing. And so what I would like to ask Ms. Whitmer, certainly we'll dig into your data, but without getting too much in the weeds, can you describe what the differences are between the state certification and what Salt Lake City does? I think that would be for the commissioners.
Sure. So one key difference is while we want everyone to have mental health training and de-escalation training, CIT training is seen as a specialty training. And what that means is that officers, best practice indicates that officers should volunteer to be CIT officers, that while everyone gets some basic training, for those who are specifically CIT officers, they should volunteer. Some forces, or they'll have about 20 to 25% of their officers who are trained. They're all on staff. Somebody is always a CIT officer, or officers are available 24/7, and dispatch knows who they are and knows how to contact them. And that's really what best practice is.
Okay, thank you.
So while it sounds appealing, everyone says we'd like all the officers to be trained. That is what leads to, what we want is officers responding who want to work with this population, who want to have that response and be involved. And and work with families. So it's like SWAT training. That is our comparison. And some agencies may want to have all officers trained and say, yeah, but we think it's so important. We want them to all be trained, but then have them be recertified to be designated CIT officers who have the specialty training and are called to respond specifically to mental health training or mental health calls.
Okay. No, thank you for that. In terms of the 40-hour basic training that officers go through in the academy, which is not the state certified program, what would you describe as the differences in that curriculum between Salt Lake City's academy and the state certification component? You're on mute.
As far as the specific training curriculum, they're very similar. One area that has been different, and that's what Salt Lake PD says, is look, we use what other places has used as a curriculum. But one significant difference is there's a use of force scenario that we would not use in state CIT training. And the whole purpose of CIT is to show alternatives to uses of force. And that's one of the concerns when we have agencies who do their own thing and their own training. It's hard to know exactly what is being trained to, and to have community voices involved in that. So that's one of the key differences with the state certified training, is that the oversight of the program involves individuals with lived experience, families, and behavioral health specialists in the oversight, but also in the actual training and the ongoing there's a state advisory committee so in addition to a board, there's a state advisory committee made up of law enforcement, behavioral health, people with lived experience who work in real time about obstacles or barriers that they may be seeing statewide, and they're able to advocate for those changes. So it's just about keeping community voices in that discussion and in that mix.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, questions for Ms. Whitworth?
I just have a quick clarification question. So there's the state training, and then each police department has their own. Is that correct? Is that what I'm hearing? That's not the same, kind of similar, but not the same.
So as far as CIT goes, there's a state certification program. That's a 40-hour training, and then there's an 8-hour recertification every year, which is another key difference, that we don't just say, oh, officers are trained and they're done, but that every year they have to be recertified to be considered CIT officers. So some areas do their own training in addition to whatever CIT is. In the case of Salt Lake City PD, they have decided to do their own CIT training. And that's the difference. So in doing that, also officers who are trained in that, if they move to another place or are hired on with another agency, the CIT training does not follow because the state has its own certification.
I see.
And that's been confusing to Salt Lake City officers, I would say.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Whitworth. And there may be some questions that pop up as we keep talking. We requested from the chief some data on calls and mental health specific calls where folks are in mental health crisis. what he described was a list of the service calls for a particular week, but some were not really identified. 96 suspicious circumstances, 117 unwanted persons, 127 suspicious persons. So any number of those could be those in a mental health crisis. So he was going to see if he could dig a little bit more and get some more specifics around those calls that that may be available. Because one of the other requests that we had was, since there's only 4 of the specialty units who are specially trained that are on duty at any given time, and they're only on duty during the day. And so our request was, do you know when you're getting a majority of calls regarding mental health issues? And he did not. And so we just, I think as we ask these questions, we could then begin to make recommendations about at least using a data-informed approach on when you're going to put these officers on the street. If the majority of calls are from 8 to midnight and they're already done and off duty by 5, that's not really much benefit to the city. So that's really why I think we're asking the question on terms of timing and when those calls come in. Any other thoughts or questions that come to mind, maybe for some additional data that we may need or that you'd be interested in gaining as we continue to talk about CIT? And let me say this too. Obviously, CIT itself is not specific to racial equity, but clearly a good number of folks in mental health crisis are folks of color and are having these interactions with police. So I think we need to be aware of that. Any other?
I guess my question is, would be why Salt Lake City is doing their own CIT training and not following the state certification. And then I always have this question about dispatchers because they receive that first call. And if they are CIT certified, or I know that the state, which is Department of Public Safety, actually was talking about having their dispatchers trained so when those calls come in, they know who to contact versus just directly contacting law enforcement. So.
Do you want me to speak to that? So first of all, with the dispatch question, I think that's so important and needs to be a big piece of it. And we have had in the past dispatchers who have been trained. So not only how to talk to someone who's in a mental health crisis and recognize, oh, this may be mental health, but know who to call. And that's the big key, that handoff. How are we getting people who are CIT trained who can respond? So I think that's a really important piece of this and needs to be part of the solution. As far as why Salt Lake City and has decided to do their own training, I have honestly been asking that for 5 years, and we've had many conversations to try and encourage a statewide approach to CIT, simply because we really would like CIT to mean the same thing regardless of what part of the state you live in. And if you travel across the state and you call CIT, it still means the same. There's the same certification, the same officers, or same training for officers that's involved. So I've been told politics, personalities. I have not personally heard anything substantive, but we have ongoing discussions to try and encourage Salt Lake City's participation, and we have continued to have that, but to this point have not made progress in that.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other thoughts or questions for Ms. Whitwer, or just in general around the CIT process?
Is there a way we can see and compare and contrast the CIT training differences between the state and SLCPDs?
Great
Yeah,
question.
if you look at the actual curriculum, and I think Salt Lake City I think they share that, the state curriculum, we'd be happy to share that. I think as far as what's in the printed curriculum, that would not look terribly different, but in the actual scenario-based training, that's where the differences would be. And in the community partnerships. So the training is a piece of it as far as how do we give officers the right tools and training. But then the big piece with mental health is how do we help each local community create a crisis response system so that they're not only are they de-escalating the situation, but they're not taking people to jail, but getting people to treatment, and that they know who to call in their own local communities to make that happen. So that's where the training will look different depending on what part of the state and what department you're in and who the behavioral health providers are in the community. But as far as the actual printed curriculum, you certainly could look at the state curriculum for sure.
Thank you. And to that point, I don't think we have specifically requested, and I don't know that, well, I won't make an editorial comment. We have not specifically requested what scenarios are used in the academy or in services for that matter. So we've seen what the curriculum is, and we're looking for the content that's trained, but scenarios make a huge difference, as supposedly, reflecting what you might run into on the job. And so we haven't seen or requested what those scenarios look like or what they're based on. So that might be another opportunity to take a deeper look at this totality of what the academy is doing and how it is training, besides what recruits are having to read in a book. So I know Ms. Lynch is listening and the chief is going to get sick of us, but I think that is a question that we can ask. What are the scenarios entitled, first of all, and then what's the content, the curriculum content of those scenarios? So Ms. Lynch, there she goes. She's hiding so we don't ask for anything else, but that's all right.
No. I'm here taking notes, so I have that note down. I'll definitely pass that along to Chief.
Okay, at least to start with, what are the titles, of those scenarios, and maybe if possible to see the content of those.
Okay, I've made a note of that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
So any other thoughts or questions, or just thoughts on how we begin to narrow the broader scope? Welcome back, Reverend. The broader scope of the CIT recommendation, which is currently prioritize it better, and ensure that all officers, specifically laterals, are basically trained, but then the priority of returning folks to become certified after their certification has expired hasn't been part of the conversation of a recommendation. According to Ms. Whitmore, it's required on a yearly basis by the state. Salt Lake City, I don't know, must be every 2 years, just assuming if it lasts for 2 years out of the academy, but I don't know. Ms. Suarez, do you by any chance know? Commissioner Suarez, do you by any chance know? Okay. We can find out what the timing is or how long a certification lasts as we get the information.
Can I make a comment towards that? So one of the recommendations, because we do have departments that say, look, we want to have all of our officers trained, and a lot of them, so best practice is that they should volunteer and that they not be trained initially that they get basic mental health training in the academy, but not be CIT trained, because they're inundated with information. They're getting so much information and they haven't had any street time yet. The SRO model says that they should have 2 years street time and then volunteer to work in schools because they want to work with that population and be in schools. So one of the recommendations is if all officers, if it's decided all officers be trained, that after a year's time or whatever, we haven't designated a time, but that officers still volunteer to get the official designation as a CIT specialized officer and go through the complete 40-hour training as volunteering outside of having some time on the street. And that way, that's following best practice. So I think you can keep both sides happy where everyone gets initial training, but those who are going to be considered part of the specialized CIT team in a department, that they go through the full 40-hour training the first time, and then after are recertified with the 8-hour training.
So then if I understand, you're suggesting best practice is not to send recruits through the 40-hour training, but to give them, what level of basic, what does basic mental health training look like?
So right now, and that's the debate. Right now at the academy, there's 16 hours. De-escalation training, we think should be added to that as an additional 8-hour training, which is a big part of CIT. For those areas who want to have all officers trained in full CIT, we don't oppose that. That's fine, but then have them still be volunteering and recertifying to be part of the specialized CIT, CIT's cadre of officers. Sure. No, and that's where, yeah.
Well, that I think we understand, certainly to be in the specialized unit, if you will. But I was just trying to clarify what you're suggesting as a best practice in the academy, which I thought you said is not to send folks through the 40 hours. So then what would you suggest, what's best practice in the academy then, I guess is my question.
So yeah, again, mental health training and de-escalation. The concern is they get so much information and they do need initial information to be able to be officers, but that they, for some of these specialized issues, that it not be lumped together with all of that initial training. So again, if there is the desire to have all officers get CIT training, great. That's great. But just have them recertified to be specialized. That's all it is.
Okay.
And we've not made specific recommendations as far as, because CIT is specialized. So it really is up to a lot of different people to decide what is adequate training in the academy itself and basic training. And we've just said, you know, more training is certainly better, but we haven't specified what that is. But if you're going to be CIT, here's what is required.
Okay, thank you. Did that give rise to any questions from commissioners? Okay, any additional thoughts on the kind of broad language of the recommendation at this point? We're certainly getting more information, but he's asking if there's any way we could narrow that at this point that you might see, or not. We can certainly wait for more information.
I think Dante, we've to go in this direction, that we will have to also deal with a scheduling issue. How do we ensure that there are persons available on every shift to be able to take care of these kind of responses.
Absolutely. And I think that's a piece of the question, as well as the budget as well, to see how the officers are placed, if you will, on the various shifts. And how many officers are there? Right now, there's 4 that are in the specialty unit, the CIT specialty unit. And they work from, their work day is done at 5. And so how do we expand, to Ms. Whitworth's point, you want people who are interested in volunteer, but if only 4 folks are volunteering out of the totality of police officers in Salt Lake City, then that seems to me a problem. So what is it that is what's the incentive to do it? What's the desire? What's impeding the desire to do it? I think all those questions are part of the discussion. To your point, how do we make sure that that we can spread the love across all the shifts, right? But great point. Okay, we will just wait on additional information, I think, at this point, coming from the chief and others. Welcome, Mr. Litback, and Ms. Connors, welcome. And so going to I think the other recommendation was community members participating in the academy and in the service. I'm not sure we could really hone that down much more until we can really see the contents of the curriculum to ensure that we can make the best recommendations based on the information that we get. I think another component that we talked about and have talked about a good bit is the field training officers. As of yet, we don't know the demographics of the field training officers. We, on some level, know the demographics of Salt Lake City PD, because we had them 2 weeks ago, and I don't know where they went. But as I recall, there were a total of 2 Black females in the entire department. I don't remember how many Black males. So anyway, the demographics are minimal, but then there's no effort specifically targeted to recruit officers of color into the academy as field training officers or trainers. So the FTOs are those who get the recruits after they're done with the academy and ready to go on the street. The trainers are those who are in the academy doing and providing the training. We don't have the demographics on either one of those just as of yet. But as I understand it, there is no targeted recruitment for either one of those 2 components of the training academy. And so just your thoughts on that, on the FTOs, maybe broadly, or the trainers broadly, and what might need to be addressed just in those who are giving the training and doing the training. And certainly, just like CIT, I mean, you want people who are interested in training their colleagues. But if there's no incentive, how do you expand the pool of those who are interested?
Do we know how they're promoting it or how they're reaching out to the officers about this?
As I recall, there's just a general call for interest. I mean, I don't know what the language is. I don't know how they're promoting it, but as I understand what was said is there's a general request for interest in those who might want to be an FTO, certainly. How they get trainers, I'm not sure at all about how they advertise and or promote the idea of coming to the training division.
And my understanding also that it's just a part of the regular shift of the of the officer. So I may be wrong in that, but that's my understanding.
For the FTOs or the trainers?
Trainers, that it's part of their regular shift. I know for the FTOs, that's the case, but for the other trainers, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think there's still, they're not on the street. They're part of the training division for whatever period of time the class is, I'm pretty sure. But again, I'm not sure how they recruit those trainers. Just thoughts on, I'm sorry, Ms. Hawkins, Commissioner Hawkins.
Sorry. So is there a way that the communities could reach out to the chief and say, hey, we need some more trainers from the different communities, just reach out and then have them give us like a job description or something so we can reach out to our communities?
Oh, you mean for the community trainer?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, what I've seen is that there's an RFP that's kind of co-created by community members and the command staff, for lack of a better opportunity of terms, that would then go out to the community for those who would be interested in co-training, co-creating some curriculum with the police department. So it's not just kind of word of mouth, but it's a process that then people would submit a request or a proposal of why they would be interested, why they would be good, what they could provide, what their experiences, things like that. As an example of what I've seen.
Is there a way just to reach out to the officers and say, hey, we need you? Just to be point blank, is just be honest and say, hey, we need more trainers. We need more FTOs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not sure how to approach that. Will the chief be on call tonight?
I'm not sure tonight. He was on last time. I'm not sure if he'll be on this evening. At this point, I doubt it. But to your point, yes, I mean, I think that's really the conversation we're having is how can we suggest, recommend, ensure that there is some type of targeted outreach to officers of color, or women for that matter, just those not in that dominant culture, to become a part of the training division. Because at this point, there's no such process.
Wow.
And so I guess I'm asking if that is something that could be a broad recommendation to that we would take back to the full commission, that we would ask that there be targeted outreach to increase the diversity of those trainers in the training division and those field training officers who are taking the recruits after the academy.
I think that would be a good idea.
Don't we have a recruitment subcommittee?
No.
No, we don't.
It's combined within the policy.
Oh, so it's policy and what is it?
Policy practices, and I believe that there was going to be recruitment committees specific to just recruitment and the process and hiring, but that became a part of the policies committee. Specific to how to hire new officers, not specifically in once they've hired and how do we get them in trainers,
Okay.
Well, I agree that with Commissioner Hawkins that it's something that we ought to recommend. And in addition to that, add somehow some kind of incentive to make it meaningful for a person to want to volunteer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there may be, Reverend, we just don't know. I think those are some of the questions that we can ask again.
Right, right.
Of, well, Captain Morcus, but even others in the training division. Okay, incentives. Any other thoughts on kind of broad recommendations regarding trainers and or FTOs?
You know, I would like to know how often it is, like, do they receive emails? Like how often it's pushed out to the officers? Like, is it just like every 6 months, like, oh, by the way, we have this position? Or is it like open every week? You know, like is it available? Like, here, go for this position, be FTO. Because if it's, you know, if they see it enough, they'll like, oh, you know what, that does sound pretty good to do. And if it's not available, if they do not see it, they're not going to do it. They're not going to apply.
Mm-hmm. No,
Does that make sense?
Yes, that's a great point. I mean, if it's just a once every year or once every 6 months,
Yeah.
it's not on anybody's mind about the possibility of being able to do that.
Yeah. And back to the CIT training for the state, I think we really need to kind of push that because I think it's just, I don't know, the right thing to do since all the other, I don't know. I think we should be certified by the state. So that's just me.
Thank you. And I think we can find out what their specific answer is as to why they are not or why they moved away from the state certification.
Right.
I won't even guess. I mean, I would imagine that they're going to say that the state is the floor and they are now going above and beyond the state's floor, but that I don't know. So I would love to hear their reason why in 2016 they moved away. That's a great point. Thank you. Any other further thoughts on FTOs, CIT, or?
Dante, just a comment about the FTO program. So I think what we're talking about is trying to attract BIPOC officers. But the thing in there, I think what we really remember is if they're not being mentored by other veteran officers or supervisors, it's going to be really hard for them to want to be an FTO. And I think Tanya said it right, is if they don't know the information or they're not being mentored and someone's saying, hey, if you want to climb the ladder or want to be a sergeant or you want to be in these positions, you have to, you know, put yourself out there. So it kind of starts with that mentoring also.
That's a great point. Because there's usually an informal mentoring process in any organization. Just who knows who and who's connected with who, and that informality makes a difference. And, you know, I've certainly seen it in, you know, who wants to take the sergeant's exam to move up from being a patrol officer to a sergeant. And without that mentoring, I mean, I've seen huge departments that had no people of color signed up to take a sergeant's exam, which makes no sense. And so to your point, how do we really ensure that there is some type of mentoring process happening for officers of color so that they can take advantage of those specialty units and specialty training and special opportunities to do those kinds of things? Great point. Great point.
Maybe, Dante, that's a third recommendation perhaps that we need to make, and that is that there be clear steps for movement from one level to the other. If you are a patrolman, how do you move? What do you have to do in order to take the exam to be a sergeant? If you're a sergeant, what do you have to do in order to be a lieutenant or a captain or whatever? And maybe those steps need to be clarified.
No, I appreciate that. And Commissioner Suarez, please help me out. I would suggest that the answer to that is going to be study for the test. But we all know the other components involved in what that means and the support that you get from people you know who are really encouraging you and helping you, and sergeants and lieutenants who are supporting your desire to take that test. And so that's kind of the informal component, I think, adds a huge piece to being able to, one, know that it's an availability, and two, feel supported and that you would be successful should you take that test. But Commissioner Suarez, I guess your thought?
No, I agree that just in my career, knowing people, no one actually came to me. So I kind of just started, I had the benefit of having an uncle in the department, but you have to, if you want to be successful in gaining those ranks, you do need those informal mentorships. And unfortunately, it's true that only certain people will get it because they know someone who knows someone else. So me getting that out, and I was part of a group called Utah Women in Law Enforcement. And that was one of our 3 things that we wanted to do, is make sure that we were mentoring other women that and offering that to them to help them, because it was even tougher as a woman. So.
Well, thank you. But to your point,
when I was in the military, there were certain time frames that you had to meet, and there were certain courses and other things that you had to do in order to get promoted to the next level. And that's what I'm suggesting, maybe some kind of clarity for the people about time frames, about what things they can do, so that what mentors they need and so forth, in order to move from one level to the other.
thank you. Probably at the very least, maybe more transparency for what those certainly are. But no, I think that's great. More, what are the clear steps and support necessary for promotion? Here's what I wrote. What are the clear steps and support necessary for promotion or engagement or opportunities in special units or other work like that? And are those transparent? Is that kind of paraphrased?
That paraphrase.
Great, thank you. Any other commissioners' thoughts?
Just a question that I want to throw out there, because as mentioned, this mentoring and this training is happening. It's just not happening amongst the diverse groups that we're hoping it's happening with. So I guess kind of thinking through, how do we suggest, or how do we recommend that they are intentional with who they are mentoring and how they're mentoring them? So how do we intentionally make sure that the diversity of individuals who are coming through these various positions or training are individuals who are coming from the communities that have continually being underserved, right? Because we already know that the mentoring is happening, but we're seeing it happening amongst a specific group only. And so just kind of really looking at how do we become very intentional in the language that's being used in the recruiting, or however way we do that, so that we are capturing the communities and groups of communities that we'd love to see in these positions. And
No,
I'm just kind of putting that out to the commission.
thank you, that's perfect. Nicely said. And maybe in that regard, another ask of, I just say the chief for lack of a better person to pick on. What are the data? What are the demographics of who has applied to take the sergeant's exam? Who has applied to become a trainer? Who has applied to become an FTO? And maybe we'll be able to see where folks aren't being utilized, or maybe how they're not being supported into some of those specialty opportunities. Would that be any other information that might be helpful that you can think of?
Yeah, I think that would be really good, because I think whenever we talk about volunteering, it never gets to the root of addressing the issue, right? So if you're just asked to volunteer and you can choose not to, then it sort of keeps us at the same place that we're at. And we see the same people volunteering who eventually decided they don't want to volunteer anymore. As we've been talking about infusing the culture of policing, and especially the Salt Lake City Police Department, I think we have to really push back on the volunteering piece and really talk about how do we keep something that's sustainable? And volunteering to me is not sustainable.
Good point. And also, I think looking at the criteria for being able to even apply for some of the specialty units. And I'm throwing out numbers that I don't know at all. But for example, I mean, if to apply for SWAT, you had to be an officer for 10 years, and the majority of people of color have only been on for 5 years, then we know what SWAT's going to look like, right? So again, I don't know the numbers at all. I'm just throwing out an example. But looking at the criteria for placement on or acceptance on some of those specialty units, I think is also important, because it's the criteria, the race neutral language that is still a huge impediment to a lot of folks of color to be able to participate in some of these things. So Ms. Lynch is listening. So criteria for being an FTO, criteria for being a trainer in the division, criteria for specialty units, be it CIT, be it SWAT, be it, whatever that might be, even being a detective for that matter. What are some of the criteria that might be a barrier to improve diversity in those units?
I've taken note of those, and I'll get those to Chief Brown.
Okay, thank you. And I know we're getting sort of outside of the training division, but it all is, I think, a component, because you have to have the training to be able to do and achieve in those units and have success. So I don't think it's that far afield. Okay.
I do have one more question.
Yes,
It's off topic. Where are the minorities and the women? I don't know what they call them. Stationed? I'm sorry, I have no idea what the right terminology is. Like, are the minorities in the Rose Park area? Are they in the Liberty Park area, Sugar House? Or is it more white are in like the Federal Heights area? I'd like to know where they're stationed at, or I have no idea what the right terminology is. I'm sorry.
What are the demographics of the precincts?
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Oh yeah, because like, say you have a woman of color who is, her precinct is out in Federal Heights. And hopefully that people will listen to her, but will they listen to her? And do you have a woman or a man of color out in Rose Park area who's been a positive role model for those kids? So I'd like to know those demographics.
Okay.
And if we could get more training out there for all Salt Lake City.
Okay.
I know it's hard. I'm sorry. My mind just went.
That's all right. It's all good thinking and good questions. So thank you. Just where do you see the diversity in the department being utilized? I guess is the big question. The overall question is, where do you see the diversity being utilized?
Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
No, your question was just fine. Okay. Any other thoughts on those particular areas? I think that was the trainers and field training officers, and then more broadly, some of the specialty units, and just looking at criteria, looking at transparency, looking at messaging, looking at incentives. So I think those are all components that we'll be able to flesh out and narrow down as we begin to do what we do. But great conversation. Anything else coming to mind?
Do we know all the specialty trainings they could do after the basic academy? Do we have a list of that?
No, we do not.
No. Is that something we could get just to see what they could be trained on after?
I am sure we can get a list of those specialty units and opportunities. So, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see what's next on our agenda. This was pretty much the agenda. Anything else in general regarding training that you're thinking of that we haven't talked about or really stepped into yet, given all the other data that's coming in? But anything, what might be also coming to mind? Big question, I know.
Dante, I can't think of anything else just at the moment. However, when we get this additional information that we requested, and I think maybe we'll be able to think more about some of the other areas as well. So I'm okay where we are for tonight. And then when we get more of the information that we requested, then we can go further, I think.
Thank you, Reverend. Other thoughts? Okay. Well, while you think about possibilities of thoughts or questions, I just want to offer some space for any comments or questions from the community who are here, community members who are here, Ms. Connors, Ms. Whitver, anything else? Any comments on the work that you see us engaging in or not engaging in, for that matter?
No, but thank you for your time. I really appreciate it and being able to speak to some of these issues.
Appreciate your expertise.
Yeah, I don't have anything, but thank you guys so much for having me.
Always welcome. Bring a friend. Bring a friend. Okay. And Mr. Lidback, anything we should know from the mayor's office as we keep doing our work?
No, Dante, though. I was going to say in the policy and practices subcommittee, we had a discussion and a report from the attorney's office on changes that are being made to the civil service laws within Salt Lake City that affects the police department. And I think there may be value, maybe if you talk to Josh, there may be value and some relevance to the training subcommittee, as it does have impact on some of the conversation about promotion and recruitment and retention that is being spoken about. I think the changes that Salt Lake City is making will have a positive impact in that sense.
Great. Thank you. I will check in with Josh, or certainly Commissioner Andrew Weirden can update us as well, since he's on there, as is Commissioner Hawkins. And so thank you. Commissioner Andrew Weirden, are you just now joining us, or do we have to catch you up, or I'm not sure how long you've been on?
Yeah, I heard you invoke my name as just a moment ago, but I just barely got on because I don't understand technology. And Coletta finally rescued me. I just overheard that last piece from David, and I think those overviews of that system, changing that civil service board, would be good for all commissioners to know, because a question comes up a lot about the accountability for officers. So knowing how that will be reviewed in the future, I think in and of itself is supporting problem.
Great, thank you. Thank you. So where we are is basically just about done. I was going to give you a few minutes back of your life, but we've expanded a little bit on the questions around training. What is the incentives provided? How is the messaging going out? What are the criteria for being a part of a specialty unit, being a trainer, being an FTO? The idea of doing targeted outreach would be important. How are officers mentored? We know that there's an informal process all the time in most any organization, but what might be a more formal process to ensure that there's opportunities for officers of color to be able to participate, take a sergeant's exam for that matter? What's the support level that's either informal or formal, and how does that work? What is the transparency around all of that? And a general recommendation of intentionality of support for officers of color to be able to move up and participate in some of the specialty units, be it training, be it FTOs, be it SWAT, be it whatever that is. Looking at the criteria for those. What are the demographics of the precincts? Where are we seeing officers of color within the department being utilized? And what's the totality of those specialty units or opportunities that exist, and how is that made known to officers? That's kind of the broad conversation of where we got, Commissioner. Anything I have missed, or is everybody ready to go get dinner? Okay, so there's a lot of data that's being asked and has been asked, so we should get some more data from the chief, hopefully by the end of the week, certainly by the beginning of next week before the next meeting, as it relates to some of the demographics of the FTOs, as it relates to, I don't remember all the questions that we asked, but Colette is all over it and is bugging the chief on our behalf. So I expect that we'll get a good chunk of data by the end of the week. We'll make sure that she will make sure that it goes out to each of you, and we'll be able to have hopefully a deeper conversation and being able to continue to narrow these broad recommendations down so that we can really have something to take as some first set of recommendations to the full commission sometime in January, and then make some presentation probably in February, late February, to the city council, as we've said that on a quarterly basis, we would do some update for them, but also bring recommendations to them on a quarterly basis, so they're not waiting for the end of the year, a year's process, and we drop a book of recommendations on them. So hopefully some of these things can be begun to be at least evaluated for implementation long before the end of this year-long process. Okay, any final thoughts or questions before we give you back a few minutes?
No, thank you.
All right, well, thank you as always.
This was a great meeting, everyone. Thank you.
all 7 minutes of it for you, great, okay. All right, well, thank you so much. Stay safe, have a phenomenal rest of your week and weekend, and we will see you next week. Stay healthy out there.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.